Welcome to Milestones. I'm Mike Johnson, and joining me today is co-host Dr. Dwayne Neal, OBE. Milestones is the podcast that has been reviewing the significant contributions made in the UK Black community since 1948. In this series, Series 2, The Windrush Nation, we're taking an inclusive approach by expanding the list of contributors to include people whose heritage is from the Caribbean, Africa, and Black British individuals with a dual heritage. Okay, Mike, thank you for that introduction, and it's a pleasure, as always, to be working with you. Milestone Series 2 is very close to my heart because we're talking about our community, and we're showing all of those wonderful contributors from the three main channels that we have. And we're very fortunate to have Rob Neal with us as as the guest contributor for this episode. Rob, why don't you briefly introduce yourself, my friend?
Oh, well, thank you very much. And thank you to Life UK. Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here. My name's Rob Neal. I'm the son of Jamaican parents. My dad arriving in 58, my mum shortly after in 62. And I was born in Paddington. After my birth, I grew up in northwest London. And whilst there was a short spell, literally for 365 days, 1 year, straddling a calendar year, with my wife, we lived in Milton Keynes. I've spent all of my lived life in and around London directly. I'm a former civil servant where I worked amongst many a politician, serving most of my 38 years at the Ministry of Justice. I let go of my beloved civil service 3 years ago working at the Department for Education. I now run my own consultancy. We're called Crystal Alliance. That's Crystal with a K, if anyone of our listeners want to look us up, crystalalliance.co.uk. Have a little splash around there. And predominantly working with members and organisations across all sectors, public, private and voluntary or charitable, around equality, diversity and inclusion. And it's a real labour of love.
Okay, thanks.
Lovely.
Rob. You mentioned Milton Keynes. I've got to pick you up there because that's where I am. So
okay.
Whereabouts in Milton Keynes were you?
Oh, wonderful, Mike. A wonderful bit of coincidence there. We lived in on a road called Westwood Close, number 43 it was, end of terrace, built from new, but in a place called Great Home.
Okay, yes. Because London...
We measured it, Mike, as 9 roundabouts in off the M1.
That's how I used to give my instructions to visitors.
Yes.
Fourth roundabout, do a left.
That's right. Exactly that. But the 9 roundabouts would take us through the edge of the point, the actual centre, and on about 3 roundabouts on. A lovely place called Great Home. It was before we had our children. We have a daughter and a son. And it was us trying to live somewhere else and exercising some form of social mobility, I guess.
And you were only 40 minutes away from central London on the train.
On a good day, Mike. Yes, on a good day. Notwithstanding HS2 connections or not.
Lovely. So if we could dive into the episode, we are actually going to be talking about politics from the standpoint of contributions by people from our community, our Windrush Nation. And we're going to kick off our conversation by talking about Baroness Patricia Scotland, by talking about the MP Kwasi Kwarteng, and talking about the former MP Chuka Umuna. And in the time-old principle of ladies first, gentlemen, should we start by talking about Patricia Scotland?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, in the research that we did in prep for this episode, we basically discovered an amazing lady And perhaps we shouldn't have been surprised because, she's risen to the level of the House of Lords, hence the Baroness. But, the three magic words that I've got at the front of my mind about her are diplomat, barrister, and politician. Diplomat, barrister, and politician. And of course, folks who've been tracking her career will know that she's in her second term as Secretary General of the Commonwealth of Nations. So let me pause it there and invite my colleagues to chip in.
Well, first thing I want to say about Baroness Scotland, I was impressed with her at the funeral of the Queen when she read the scripture reading. I thought, whoa, yes, I would want to listen to that. That was excellent. And that's just stood out straight away. She did a video for us when we celebrated the 75th anniversary of Windrush at the Brixton Church.
She did.
And that went down very well. So, yeah, she combined all her roles to do a marvelous job there for us.
Well, I want to chip in because it's strange how these things work out, because coincidentally, and you're right, Dwayne, with the channels, I think you described them as that we could have chosen and the people we could have chosen from those channels. I happen to have worked with all three. I've worked with all three of these individuals. I've worked with Patricia, I've worked with Kwasi, and I've worked with Chuka. And as we're talking about Baroness Patricia Scotland, the first woman Attorney General, the first Black woman Attorney General at that. She was actually the first Black woman QC back in 91.
Absolutely.
Council. And she was the first Black minister, though not elected, but the first Black minister when she became a minister at the Lord Chancellor's Department, which is where I worked with her. I remember once I shared a car journey with her, and it was a wonderful occasion. It wasn't planned. It happened to be that I was able to go in the car as we travelled from London to Birmingham. And the journey was just over 2 hours. And in that time, she shared some absolute pearls of wisdom with me that shall remain in the conversation between she and I. But she, at a point around about halfway through my career, she was able to pour into that and give me some sage advice. I remember very much we shared, at the time, she was assistant to the Queen's Counsel. And so we shared many a story about what it was she felt would be useful to deliver on some of the projects I was working on, and chiefly around delivery on racial equity at the time with the Black Staff Network. She was the absolute powerhouse. You're right, Dwayne, diplomat for sure, the Baroness that she is, and obviously the work that she does. But I remember, and what I can share in this offering is her absolute commitment to delivery and making sure that you followed through on what it is you'd say you'd do. And she was very much a doer. She wasn't concerned about who knew her or what reputation may have moved ahead of her. She was about getting things done. And if you look at her performances today, she's very much attached to the campaign about violence against women. She's a powerful advocate around that. She believes very much in social capital. She talks about wanting to put the wealth back into the common in her current role, as you say, Dwayne, now into her 5th year there. And she's a wonderful advocate around what we have in common as people across all ethnicities. She's a real believer in what Mayor Angelou talks about, that we have far more in common than we are different. And that she talks about, so she leans on the DNA of it all and says we've got, 98.9% of us is identical. And the bit that's different is the rich diversity that we can add spice to each other's lives. And she spoke to me about that personally as part of that journey. A wonderful role model, a wonderful servant for the UK government, and someone that I have worked with in 2 different guises. And I don't know if you know this, Dwayne, but she was one of the speakers at the original launch of the REACH programme before Reach Society. Yeah, she was one of the keynote
I
speakers
didn't
there.
know that, but it doesn't surprise me,
Yeah.
given the nature of her background and
Yeah.
her, priorities. Mike, did you want to come in there before I broaden the
Yes, I was going
conversation
to ask
around her?
Rob, knowing what you know about her, the many
Yeah.
firsts that she has in her life,
Yeah.
how did that make her? Did she seem, a humble, down-to-earth person, or
Mhm.
from what you're saying, I think it was that. Yeah, she still was level-headed, humble, and willing to pour into other people rather than letting all those things.
Well, without question, yeah, absolutely, Mike. I mean, she born in Dominica, of course, but she grew up in Walthamstow.
Mm.
What she had more than anything else, she never campaigned to be the first at anything. She never. That was not her aspiration. She just wanted to do a good job. Her talent did the rest. The fact that she was chosen for Attorney General by the then Labour Party's appointment, the fact that she was trustee and at times patron. She was one of the trustees at Reality, which stands for Raising Everyone's Awareness of Lives Lost in the Youth. That was homed in Walthamstow, but she was approached by the then director at Reality and founder Leroy Logan, who many of our listeners may have heard of, out of the Black Police Association. And that union gave rise to that appointment for herself as trustee. And she was so committed to it in a very quiet way, Mike, in answer to your question. Hardly anybody knew. She was never looking for a stage, or there was no fanfare. It was about what she could do to help with that cause. And that came shining through. I remember one time we had a lunchtime meeting across the lunch period of those that were running the Black Staff Network. And she had literally herself, very unusual for someone in her position, wandered into the cafeteria to catch herself something to eat. And she saw us on the table and she walked over and she said to us, how's it all going? How's the network going? I said, well, we're working hard. We're putting in the hours. And she said, I've got one bit of advice for you. And she asked for a napkin and she took out a pen, a rather fancy pen, and she wrote, I didn't know what she'd written down, but she wrote on a napkin. She said, don't look at this until you've finished your meeting. And so she gave me the napkin and folded it. Something was written on the napkin and she left the cafeteria. I kept to the promise. We waited until the end of the meeting. We made our way back up. I think we were working on the 5th floor. I took out the napkin, and on that napkin, she had written one word and then signed it. And that one word was delivery. And that was nearly 22, 23 years ago. And I've kept the napkin.
Wow.
I acetated it and kept it. And that has kept me going through my career day after day after day.
A wonderful example of people who make a difference because they understand. Of course, you need to talk about things and understand them. But if you don't perform the action part of whatever you're talking about, if you don't deliver, invariably you make little or no difference whatsoever. She started effectively from the same place that all of us did. There was no silver spoon, but there was ambition within the family. She went to the local school. She went on to read for a good degree in law. She went on to become, a professional and was called to the bar. And as you say, Rob, she has continued to deliver. And by virtue of her consistent delivery, she was invited to various situations. And I would like to think many of the viewers will remember that about her example, because once you start getting that and you look around our community, you can see those who are making a difference because they understand delivery matters.